Andrew George.
Mr Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Lewisham and Deptford. In fact, in coming to this debate, I suppose I come at it in many of the same ways in which the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Kingston upon Hull, approaches it. And I won't speak for 7 minutes suggesting that the debate is a sideshow, but in a sense, the information which I guess might be published, if it were to be published, it is probably, like the Right Honourable Gentleman suggests, is unlikely to change a single mind on the issue. And I think that reflects the nature of the kind of debates that we have and the rather entrenched positions which people inevitably take up in this kind of heated debate on issues such as this. And that it's the nature, I suppose, of the process of politics. I will in a moment. I just want to make my philosophical point first, and I'll let the Honourable Gentleman come in. But it's the nature of the process of politics, in my view, that in contrast to academia, which start with a question and an inquiry and gather evidence and come to a considered opinion, I think that the pity of politics is that we start with a prejudice and backfill with the evidence which suits our case. I will give way. Yes.
Giving way. He says that publication of the Transition Risk Register wouldn't change one mind, but would he not accept the Information Commissioner, who has read and studied the Risk Register, is of the view in his decision notice that it would aid public understanding of the reforms and help reassure the public that all the risks have properly been considered?
I agree with the Honourable Gentleman, and I have signed the EDM in support of the release of the register. And I believe that generally it's best, particularly if you're taking the biggest ever reorganisation of the NHS, it's best not to do that in the dark. It's best to have as much information available to you as possible. I'm not suggesting that we are in the dark. I'm just suggesting, and I know that the Right Honourable completely in the dark, but I'm just saying it's best to have the most light cast upon the information so that we actually have an informed debate rather than a semi-informed debate. And I think that the Honourable Gentleman makes a very good point on that. And in this regard, it is inevitable that if and when, and I guess it is going to eventually be dragged out of this particular process, and I don't think that's going to help the Secretary of State or the government if it is dragged out rather than conceded, that it'll be inevitable that the opposition, people who oppose the bill, that the opposition will tend to highlight and alight upon the worst case scenarios and throw them at the government, and the government will inevitably look at the best case scenarios and so the nature of political debate. Well, I don't think it'll be improved by this particular process, but I do hope that it'll be better informed. I mean, a lot of the debate throughout the process of the bill so far, and obviously I've, through the Select Committee and elsewhere, have been involved in that process of trying to anticipate what the effects of these reforms are going to be. And clearly it'd be far better to ensure that if we are attempting to anticipate these things into the future, that we do so from the position of the best information from those people who actually are inside the service and providing that advice, and that's why the risk register, I think, should be. And the impact assessment is a selection, is perhaps the selected highlights of that particular process, I would argue. Well, the Secretary of State can intervene on me if he wishes, but I think that the underlying I will just make this point, and then I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman. The underlying core concern, I guess, and this is the nature of the way in which we look at these issues, is will the publication of the risk register negatively affect the technical delivery of government policy and services, or will it affect the political prospects of a political party or those in government? And I think that the nature of this debate is that we assume that if it's being resisted, that in some way it's going to have political rather than technical consequences. And obviously, in the case of the risk register, if I thought it was going to have technical consequences on the effective delivery of government, which is, I think, the primary point which the Secretary of State is advancing, then clearly we do need to think very carefully about the release of such information. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Can the Honourable Member remind the House what criteria
the former Secretary of State used when he rejected publishing the register in 2009. In 2009.
I'm grateful to that intervention. That kind of plays into my next point, which is my general concern about the nature of opposition day debates. Not that I don't think that opposition parties should actually have the opportunity to debate issues, but they tend to over-dramatise, in my view, the political tribalism of this House. And of course, we must challenge, and rightly challenge, any party. It's the nature of politics, isn't it? That if you're, it's the nature of government rather, that if you're, when you're in government, you tend to have to face up to unpopular decisions and take them, when in fact, if you're in opposition, you tend to avoid them, and you tend to avoid the fact that, and equally, on this particular issue, you tend to say that you would be more open when you have the opportunity of being in opposition. You look at it from a different perspective, and you tend to take the view that you would have a more open government from the perspective of the opposition benches. And when you come into government, you tend to err on the side of seeing good technical reasons as to why you can't engage in the process of open government. I'll give way, but I'm going to lose time, but I'll be very brief.
Very brief. This transitional risk register refers specifically to the bill about which there is widespread concern. It's unprecedented in that respect. So with due respect, his argument really doesn't hold.
I'm cantering around the issues. I mean, I've signed the EDM. So as far as the issue is concerned, in my own judgment, disclosure is better than not. So I'm saying, but there is also a further point which I wish to make, which is the kid's psychology of this whole thing, that we all tend to want what we can't have, and as a result of that, if we tend to kind of obsess about that particular issue, we might take our eyes off the ball of what the debate ought to be about, which comes back to the point the right honourable gentleman, former Secretary of State, made, that it's in fact we want to when we I mean, if I would say this to, or rather ask the Minister winding up, I mean, when has disclosure of such documents actually harmed government public services? I mean, if we could have examples of where disclosure of information actually harms the effective delivery of government and effective government, then I think we would be beginning to actually mount a case for actually trying to define the lines of where and when such documents should be published. But I mean, on the basis of the debate so far, I'm not sure that we've demonstrated that if we were given the new toy in this political playground of the publication of the risk register, that it would necessarily improve the quality of the debate so far. I'm sorry to say, but the main show, rather than the sideshow, of course, is the bill itself. And what concerns me in this regard is that we're now in a situation where actually, if the risk register were to be published soon, and we were to have information which would actually help to perhaps even change people's minds and actually have a more informed debate, actually coming to a considered conclusion that perhaps it would be best to withdraw the bill, for example, actually isn't possible because of the nature of the prism of Westminster, the Westminster Village itself, because we live in the context of the kind of virility context in which such decisions are taken. Actually, the climb down necessary for a Secretary of State to withdraw a bill like this would be catastrophic both for himself and also for the government. And so you end up continuing on with possibly what I believe, and I've put my views in the public domain on many occasions on this issue, could be catastrophic for the NHS. I mean, if the right honourable gentleman wants to win Liberal Democrats, then describing us as spineless won't necessarily get many into the lobbies with him. And if he doesn't want to contaminate his party with people he believes are so infected with such a disabling condition, I'm not sure it'll help. Thank you.
Ulrich.
Down from 4.3 weeks at the last election to 3.8 weeks now. I know my honourable friend will join me in appreciating the success of the NHS in improving waiting times.
Well,
I do indeed welcome that news, and I don't question the Secretary of State's statement with regard to that, but I am just curious that on the one hand, the Shadow Secretary of State is saying it's all going terribly badly, and yet he's opposing the reform of the NHS, and yet the Secretary of State is saying that actually the outcomes have never been better, so why is he pressing on with the bill?
Well, because the argument, and actually the curious thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I know my honourable friend will appreciate this, is that actually even the Leader of the Opposition says reform is needed in the NHS because of the challenges. Well,